Well, hi everybody. I hope you can hear me and see me okay. This is the first time I've done my art chat YouTube live, so we may have some technical difficulties. I don't know. Just let me know if you're there. You can leave messages that I will get and I'll be able to answer. I hope you can hear me. Let me know you're here. We're going to talk today about elements of art. You can take part by asking me questions and leaving me comments. And if you like the YouTube tutorial at the end of this session, then please press like. And if you fancy subscribing, you'll get information about future live chats and tutorials. You can also subscribe and join my Facebook page. That's Art Carmarthen Community Centre on Facebook, and there's regular updates there. A lot of my students follow me on Facebook. And hi to everybody. If you are struggling making comments or leaving messages, don't worry for today. We'll try and sort things out as we go along. We're all learning with this new technology. I'm just glad I'm actually live on YouTube rather than Facebook, because with Facebook we're having some streaming issues. Okay, so today, I hope everybody's well, by the way. We seem to be sort of chugging along. I'm receiving letters and messages from everybody, which is really lovely. It's nice to keep in touch, and everybody's saying the same thing. I think after 8 weeks of lockdown, everybody's getting a bit bored, so if we're given something to do, it's helping. I'm being given things to do as well. I'm doing a seed swap and a book swap and an art swap even. We've been making up bags for the YMCA, little art bags for children and things like that. So that's been good. I've been donating some materials. So anyway, back to our art chat. This is something that's taught to all art students when they begin art courses. So if you go and do an art foundation or even an A-level, or even if you jump straight in and go and do a degree, you would be taught the sort of basic principles of art. It might be something that you do at GCSE level as well, or the old O level, but a lot of people tend to forget, especially if they did it years ago, the basic principles of the elements of art. So I just thought it'd be nice to refresh and go back and explore those elements, because it's not something we think about when we're just doing paintings every day. So apparently we've got 2 viewers, so that's good. We've got 2 participants. That means that people have managed to find me. I will run this again on Facebook, and it will be on my YouTube channel from the end of the session. So if you have problems getting online or registering or whatever it is, then you can always catch up later. Hi, those people that have joined me for this first session. So what are the elements of art? Well, we go from line, value, shape and form, texture, space and colour. So they're the basic 6 elements of art. There are other elements of art like pattern and rhythm and motion and all that sort of thing, which we may talk about if everybody enjoys this sort of very much beginner's session in art, theory in a way. then maybe we could do a second session of the further elements of art next week. Let me know if you're interested, otherwise I'll talk about something else. So the first one is line. So a line is basically a path traced by a moving point. So that can be anything. So it could be a paintbrush or a pencil or a pen, anything that makes a mark on a surface. So that could be a canvas or paper or even a wall. Okay, so I've got a piece of paper here and a pen, and I'm just going to make a mark or two, different kinds of marks. So, you know, you could have straight lines, you could have dashes, you could have dots, you could have, let's see, can you see this now? So we've got straight lines, dashes, dots. You can have sort of squiggly lines. You could have spirals and things like that. It can be a contour. So it could be that you're drawing the contour of an object. Like, I'm doing this in reverse, so I'm trying my best to draw this upside down. So, you know, that's a contour line. You see? So that's one of the elements of art, is a line that is traced by a moving point. So that's a moving point, and whatever marks you make in that process, that is a line, and it can be anything, like I said, in pen, pencil, that sort of thing. Okay, so the next thing is value. I'll just say at the end of this session, I'm going to put on Facebook, and I'll put a link to a page on the YouTube tutorial with a little test sheet. I'll show you. I've got one here. So that you can print this off and think about it again, because obviously when I'm talking to you, you're not necessarily taking everything. You might be having a cup of tea, you might be having your breakfast, you might be sort of busy looking at other things. So it's kind of nice to have a sort of revision sheet so you can refresh your memory about what we're talking about. So that is line. Okay. So the next one is value. Now, people get confused with value because there are sort of different ideas with value. So you've got a value is basically the colour. There are three elements. You've got hue, and you've got shade and tone. So you've got hue, which is the colour of the thing that you're working with. So whether it's blue or red or whatever, that's the hue. And then you've got the value. So the value is basically the tones from dark to light. So that could be, so using a pencil, if I just make a rectangle like this, so a hue would be a colour or anything, even this grey, going from dark. So this would be dark, and this is the value. So value would be going really dark. I'm just going to put this down on my lap so I can press a bit harder. So you've got dark, and then you've got slightly lighter, then slightly lighter, slightly lighter, slightly lighter, and it's just the tone of the mark that you're making. So it can either be a dark tone of, and this could be the same in any colour as well. So in the same way that if you had purple, the value of that would be determined by how hard you press with your crayon, or if it's with regard to paint, it would be how much water, if you were using watercolour, this is quite difficult to do that way up, so I'll just do it quickly here. So, for example, if you're using watercolour, the value is determined by how much water you put into your watercolour. So basically, you would use the watercolour straight out of the tube or straight out of the pan for the darker values, and then you would add drops of water accordingly. So if you add lots of water in, you would end up with a light tone like this, a light value. And if you didn't add so much water, then you would end up with a dark value. And with pencils and crayons and pens, felt pens and things like that, it is just about how hard you press as to what value you get within this range. So this is a light value and this is a dark value. Okay? And you would use that principle or those principles of value to shade an object. So if you were shading a circle, for example, and the light was coming from the left-hand side, then you would press really hard with your pencil on the right-hand side so that the right-hand side would be darker. And so if I just do a quick circle and the light was coming from the left, then you would shade the right-hand side really light, and so you can see here the left-hand side is darker and the right-hand side is lighter. So that would be the basic element of value shading. Okay, yeah, like this. Okay, so that's the value of a colour. Okay, so the next thing would be texture. So a texture, so we've had line, that's the first element of art. The second one is value. The third one is texture. And they have two words when they talk about texture, or when we talk about texture. And one of the words is actual texture. So that can be created using the materials that you're working with. So that's a texture like we put textured medium into paint to make it thicker and so that it sort of keeps its shape. So if you to sort of stipple it, it would have raised areas. So if you were to put textured medium into acrylic, for example, then that would be an actual texture of the medium. So that can also involve mixed media. So we often put things like rice or even seeds, dried seeds, into paint. You can buy ready-made textures, but I like using textures from bits and bobs that I use around the house. So you can even put things like sand in, or little bits of bubble wrap, or tissue, or whatever. So mixed media, effectively, one of the elements of mixed media is what they call actual texture. So that's an actual object or something that you put into your paint to make it textured. And in watercolour, you don't do that very often, but you can apply things like textured medium. They have a granulation medium and all that sort of thing, and that will give you a texture. The other word is called implied texture, and that is texture created by using things like pattern or strokes or shapes or images, that sort of thing. So that's actually physically drawn, if you see what I mean. So if I show you after a quick sip of tea what I mean by that. So this is implied texture. Like I said, there will be a worksheet after this so that you can revise and try and remember. So texture, I suppose the sort of everybody's main sort of idea of an implied texture would be something like a cross hatching. So we do cross hatching a lot. So that means we put diagonal lines down, and then we put diagonal lines going in the opposite direction, and that gives you a rough feeling of a texture. It could be just building up sort of squiggles, and the texture, the texture to the eye is created by the marks that you're creating. It could just be sort of strokes, so they could be just strokes one on top of the other, and that build up will give you a feeling of a different kind of texture. It could just be dots. The pointillists used dots to create texture, so they might use very, very small dots quite intensively closely together to create very dark areas, and then just use larger dots around, or circles like I'm doing here, to create a different, so larger dots of paint to create a slightly different texture. Okay, they're quite good to look at actually, because all they worked with was dots of paint and they created pictures. So that's a really interesting a range of painters to look at with regard to implied texture, which is just basically mark making. So we've got implied texture, which is mark making, and then we've got actual texture, which is using materials added to paint or whatever to create texture. Okay, I hope that's not too complex, and that you understand what I'm saying to you. So that okay, so the next thing we have is shape and form. So shapes are basically enclosed two-dimensional areas, and shapes are always flat. Okay, form is sort of a representation of 3D. So form has height, width, and depth. So it's three-dimensional. So form is three-dimensional, shape is flat. Okay, so just again a basic drawing. So a square like that is just a shape. However, as soon as you put on the lines going backwards, you're creating a form. So you're creating a box shape. Okay, so that's what form is. So the form is the 3D shape, and the square on its own is shape. So shape and form work together, and obviously we use those all the time to create various visual objects on a two-dimensional background. Well, not always, but you know, if you're working in sculpture, then that's different. But you're working with shapes and forms to create a picture. Okay, so there are different elements of shapes and forms. So you've got geometric elements. So you've got triangles and circles and squares and polygons and all that sort of thing. And then you've got organic forms like leaf shapes. What else? Cloud shapes, things like that. They're sort of softer forms. So you've got, like I said, geometric and organic shapes and forms. And you've also got positive and negative forms. So you've got an object sitting within a background. So you've got like a circle sitting within a square background. So the circle would be the object or the positive shape, and the space around it would be the negative shape. Okay, so but the main thing to remember is that a shape is two-dimensional and form is three-dimensional. Okay, then I just made a reference to space then. So we're on to space next, and that is positive and negative space. So if you watch the Life Drawing Live a week ago, you will have heard them refer to positive and negative space. So I always, whenever we do any kind of drawing, I say look at the shapes around the object as well as the object itself. They're as important as the object itself. It really helps. I remember being taught this when I was doing my art foundation and we were doing life drawing, and it was like a revelation because I'd never looked at the shapes, or I'd never sort of really considered the shapes around an object. But that is essential. If you make a mistake in your drawing, if you look at the shapes of the forms around the objects, that can often help you, just redraw something so it's correct. So the space around the object, there's various ways of creating the illusion of space. So you've got things like the size relationship of the objects against one another. So if you look at clouds, for example, which you can do today, there's some beautiful ones out there today. You've got large bulk forms in the foreground nearest to you, and then as they go off into the distance, they get smaller. That's basics of perspective, which could be another talk. So that idea of objects that are closer to you being larger and objects that are further away from you being smaller is an important thing to observe when creating an image. Even if you're just working with still life, and you've got a teapot in the foreground and a vase in the background, you have to recognise that the teapot in the foreground will be slightly larger than the vase in the background, because it's in the background. If it was side by side, they would be equal in shape, but because it's in the distance, the vase becomes smaller. Even if it's a larger vase, it's still smaller because it's further away. Okay, so placement of objects, like I just said, with the still life, things that overlap, so they create the idea of space within an image. The way that values change, we discuss all the time because we paint landscapes most of the time in classes. The idea that as things go off into the distance, they become more and more blue. So that is based on the colour of haze. So it's the colour of the air as it goes away from you. So you see less intense colour as it goes away, so it becomes bluer. So if somebody comes to me with a painting where the distant hills are feeling like they're coming towards you more than they should do, one way of repairing that is to just put a very thin glaze of blue over the top of those hills, and it makes them go backwards. It's an illusion created by the eye and the atmosphere, and it will send your painting backwards. So if you have paintings at home where you've painted the hills maybe too green or a very strong brown, and they feel like they're closer than they should be, try that. Try just putting a thin coat of blue on, especially with watercolour. It's very successful with watercolour. Over the top of that particular hill, and you'll see it go backwards. And I tend to put a very thin coat on, and then let it dry, look at it, see if it's worked. If it hasn't worked enough, then you put another coat on and another coat on until you're happy with the result. Very good method to solve the problem of space and perspective and all that sort of thing. Okay, and then obviously there's perspective and linear perspective and things like that, which is far more complicated. And I will do a talk on perspective in one of my sessions because it's something that people ask me an awful lot about. So we're space, and then the final element of art is colour. So colour is produced when basically when light strikes an object. So the different elements of light will, and light is made up of a multitude of colours, strikes an object and it makes it either green or blue or whatever it is. So that is colour. And like I said, colour has three elements within it. So it's the hue, which the hue of the colour is just the colour itself. Quite often, I haven't got a tube here, but you will, when you're buying a tube of paint, it'll say hue on it. If it does say hue on it, it tends to denote the fact that it's a slightly paler tone of that colour. Okay, so the main colours are red, yellow and green. They're the main hues, they're the strongest hues of colour, and then you mix down to secondary and tertiary colours from there. Again, I can do another talk on secondary and primary, secondary and tertiary colours. Tertiary, primary is red, yellow, green, red, yellow, blue, and then secondary are mixes of those two. So red and yellow make orange, blue and yellow make green, and red and blue make purple. So purple, green and orange are your tertiary colours, and then mixes of those colours together make your your secondary, your tertiary colours. So yeah, that again is another lesson. So we can do a colour wheel. I did a very basic colour wheel in one of my other YouTube tutorials, and also I did I'll show you, we did a couple of things in the week on the tutorials. So go to my YouTube channel and have a look. So this was my very basic colour wheel. So that's where you've got your yellow, your blue and your red, and the two tones mixed together to make other colours. That's your secondary colours. And then I did a mixing sheet of greens. So that is literally just taking your yellow and your blue in order to make green. And these are different values. So they would go from the yellow, which is straight out of the tube, and then as you add the blue, they go darker but greener. Okay. And we also looked at a few colours that I made at home. So I made homemade colours. That's if you run out of paint. You can use home products to create colours. So you've got coffee, rhubarb, grass, cabbage, onions and turmeric. And with those colours we did some very basic tree structures. So that's colour. So just to refresh a little bit, you've got line, which is the path of a moving point through space, yeah, with a pencil or a pen or a crayon. You've got shape and form. Shape is 2-dimensional, form is 3-dimensional. You've got colour, which has 3 elements to it: the hue, the intensity and the value. Actually, we didn't talk about intensity. So intensity just refers to, I don't know whether you can see it with these pencils that I've got in front of me, but some colours will be more intense than others. So these are all greens. And for example, this colour here is less intense than this colour here. So it's slightly muted. So this is green with a little bit of white added into it. So I don't know whether you can see that. I hope you can. This one is green. It's had yellow into it. So when you use those colours, this colour would be more intense than this colour. So basically, the colour remains more intense the less it's mixed. So green is already yellow and blue mixed together, right? So that was what created that. And then this is the green mixed with a little bit of white. So that then makes it less intense, in the same way that if you add a little bit of black, then that makes it less intense. So that's what intensity of colour means, okay? So you tend to find, like in a watercolour set, that the more intense colours will be the ones that are stronger in the main elements of pigment. So things like indigos and stuff like that, where there's more blue in that pigment, that will be more intense. Very sort of inky colours. The viridian in the green is incredibly intense because it's got more green in it. It's got more, and then as soon as you add white into it, it becomes less intense. Okay, so I don't know, I'm lost now where I got to. So we did line, shape, form, colour, value. Value, like I said, is the darkness or the lightness of a material. So in paint or in pencil, the pencil would be darker, and then it would go through all the ranges of shading to light tone. So it's dark to light, it's a value. Texture, we talked about applied. and actual. So implied is just mark making, and then actual texture is the actual nature of putting in an object into your paint or whatever you're using to make it textural. And then space, and space is either 2 or 3 dimensional. Like I said, that's got to do with form. So I hope I've covered everything there. I think I have. Like I said, I just summarised there. If you've got any questions, just ask away. Like I said, I'll put a worksheet on the Facebook page, and I'll try and put one on onto the YouTube tutorial as well, so that you can have a go at refreshing what we've been talking about. So yeah, have a go, leave comments, subscribe. You can subscribe live as well as just on my channel. Have a look at all my videos. I won't be posting a art chat next week because it's half term, and there won't be any tutorials, so that'll give you a chance to catch up on all the tutorials that you've missed out on. Please share them with people. I know that a lot of you have been sharing them, because I've been getting contact through from students that I don't know, which is really lovely. What else? Don't forget to like it. I hope you've been watching some interesting things on the TV. I watched a little film yesterday about the Bilbao gallery in the Guggenheim in Spain, and they were talking about the large flower dog outside and how to restore it. So they're busy in the process of restoring that. They have to replant it every year. And I'll put a link to that on Facebook as well. Have a look. It's really interesting. And especially if you've been watching the Chelsea Flower Show and things like that, you can see that one of the tips that the curator gave for when they were restoring and replanting the dog was that they on the underside of the chin they use ivy, because ivy is dark and that creates the illusion of shade on the underside of his chin. So that sort of refers back to these elements of art and how different textures and different colours help you to describe an object. So have a look at that. Chelsea's been really great. It was a shame to hear about Nigel off of Gardener's World. Very sad, but I did a little time-lapse drawing. Again, the finished piece is on Facebook, so if you want to download it and you can have a go yourself, then that's great. Have a go at mixing colours and doing some tonal things. Again, with the workshop on Facebook, the worksheet, sorry. Some people have said to me, how do I print from these images? Basically, all you need to do is right-click on the image, save it. You can save it into your documents or whatever, and then from that you can print. Okay, if you have any issues, just let me know and I'll try and help you. And then the other question, one of the other questions that came through was whether we're going to be going back to teaching at the community centre. I think all of us are in the same position. We're very unsure. They're talking about schools going back, but whether that happens. As far as I know, there doesn't seem to be any likelihood that the centre will be open over the summer. They may decide that, I don't know. If they do, I might run some one-off classes because I think people will be dying to get back. But I'll let you know about that. But I've booked for September. They've said they've taken the booking. But again, they've said they're still not sure whether they'll even be open in September. So this could carry on forever, you know. But at least we've got these live sessions and the tutorials. And thanks to everybody who sent donations in and things like that. It's been really great. And the pictures as well, some of which you can see on Facebook. So thanks for contributing, and stay safe, everybody. And I will see you in a couple of weeks' time. Okay, stay safe. Bye.